In 1741, Benning Wentworth, governor of New Hampshire, chartered the first town in the land disputed between his colony and that of New York. He named the town Bennington and placed it on the far western border of this disputed land, a mere 20 miles east of Lake Champlain. New York didn't raise much fuss, seeing as it was only a paper town and had not been settled. Wentworth took their silence as consent and chartered many more towns in this land over the next few years. 20 years later, in 1761, a proprietor named Samuel Robinson gathered several families together and settled Bennington. Soon others were settling the land they had bought from New Hampshire. This finally gave New York a reason to jump into action. They demanded the governor of New Hampshire stop selling disputed land until it could be taken up with the King of England. King George III didn't see any importance in this land and gave a vague ruling for it to be in New York's possession. The colonists of the New Hampshire grants were outraged by the demands placed on them by New York to purchase their land for a second time. They refused, and their land was sold off to other people. This would be a huge battle between New York and Vermont for the next few years. The townsmen of the New Hampshire grants were constantly on the verge of eviction. To defend the land they felt they rightfully owned from the New York settlers, a militia was formed. Led by Ethan Allen, the Green Mountain Boys, who used threats and embarrassment to keep New York at bay, were soon the most organized group of people in the colonies. They were rough, but never killed nor seriously injured their enemies. It's said that the most severe injury sustained in any altercation was the thumb of Remember Baker, cousin of Ethan Allen, being cut off. This didn't mean they weren't afraid to use force if it was necessary. Almost 15 years after the settling of Bennington, revolution was on the mind of the colonists. In May of 1775, Ethan Allen was called by Connecticut to procure the cannon at Fort Ticonderoga. His journey started in Pownell, Vermont, and followed the historic Route 7A. In Bennington, where he lived, he stopped at Fay's Tavern, more commonly called the Catamount Tavern, which was the headquarters for the Green Mountain Boys. He made plans for the journey and gathered men from the town before moving on to Galusha's Tavern in Shaftesbury, where they rested before moving on to Arlington. Arlington was an Episcopalian or Church of England settlement and full of English sympathizers, so Ethan Allen moved through quickly to keep suspicion down. The next town, Sunderland, was the home of Ethan Allen's brother, Ira Allen. Once gathering men from Sunderland, they moved on through the trade town of Manchester. They dined here and spent the night in the taverns before continuing their journey towards the fort. Ethan Allen gathered men from the towns of Dorset, Rupert, Paulet, Wells, and Pulteney before arriving at the last town before Fort Ticonderoga, which was Castleton. Once at Castleton, Ethan Allen was elected as command of the operation. Benedict Arnold, a military man who had gotten orders to capture Fort Ticonderoga from Massachusetts, met Ethan Allen in Castleton and demanded to be given full leadership of the mission. With no army to back him, however, he was ridiculed for these demands. Ethan Allen, not wanting Benedict Arnold to leak the operation to the now unsuspecting English, made him second in command, demoting Seth Warner to third. The operation was a complete success. Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys caught the English completely off guard, and on May 10, 1775, they captured Fort Ticonderoga, the first American success in the War for Independence. Important members of Ethan Allen's team included Noah Phelps, who was sent to gather info on the fort by pretending to be a woodsman who needed a haircut, Samuel Herrick, who went to Speensboro, now called Whitehall, for boats to cross the lake to Fort Ticonderoga, and Nathan Beeman, a youth who had played in the fort often, who was to be Ethan Allen's guide. All in all, Ethan Allen had between 300 and 500 men with him. However, due to not getting enough boats, only 83 men went on to capture the fort. In 1776, on July 4th, America declared independence from England. 6 months prior, on January 15th, the Vermont Republic was formed. The previous New Hampshire grants declared their land as their own and refused to take orders from England, New York, New Hampshire, or the Continental Congress. This didn't mean they were against helping the colonies, but that they were to be seen as a separate entity. The main reason they formed the new country was the fact that America refused to allow them to enter the Union as the 14th original colony. In the War for Independence, General John Burgoyne, in a joint attempt with General Howe to cut the colonies in half, had captured Fort Ticonderoga and towns south all the way to Manchester. The Vermont Republic, to defend its land and citizens, took action. Due to his slow movement, the Green Mountain Boys were able to, under the orders of Seth Warner, another cousin of Ethan Allen, fortify Walloomsac, 10 miles from an important supplies cache in Bennington, to defend against the advancing army. Between August 13th and 16th in 1777, several battles were fought, and thanks to the reinforcements from New Hampshire, led by John Stark, the colonists won. After the War for Independence, the Vermont Republic went on as a country. It had its own government, its own flag, its own currency, and it had even started making treaties with other countries. This international activity was what finally pushed America into inviting them into the Union. Vermont became the 14th state in 1791. Many of the citizens preferred this bond with America, and no one can truly know exactly what Vermont would be like today if they had remained their own country. But the fact remained. We had remained outside of the protection of the United States for several years, and were able to establish a government outside of the U.S. Constitution. Vermont is not often dwelt on for their involvement in the War for Independence, nor for the fact that they were one of the only two states that had ever been their own country before joining the Union. It's mostly known for its cheese and its maple syrup, which, while they are delicious, they are only part of what Vermont has offered and done since being settled. Vermont is a strong land filled with artists, farmers, and people from all walks of life. It's a beautiful part of the country, and many people come here to see the many historical places that have been preserved for centuries. Its beautiful winters, colorful falls, and mild summers are all wonderful places to spend your time all year around. The small family shops and clean parks make going out and enjoying nature absolutely wonderful. There's no place like the breathtaking state of Vermont.